What's up, YouTube? It's me, the artisanmc, and today I'm going to give you a reaction to The BeeKeeper, starring Jason Statham. Now, I saw this trailer a while back. Um, I believe it was back in November, and I can't remember what movie I was seeing when I actually saw this trailer, but it looked really good. It looked very interesting in the sense that story wise, I'm getting a bit of clandestine government agency feel to it. One man wrecking crew kind of situation, which shouldn't be a problem for anybody watching movies nowadays since they've made John Wick a hit. Equalizer was a hit. Silent Night did what it did. This is a common trope in American filmmaking that usually tends to work. For me, I was interested because I like Jason Statham. I really think it's very interesting that he has turned himself into a hell of an action star over the course of his time on the screen. I mean, I remember when I first saw him in Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and I'm not knowing him as a fighter at all. I didn't see him throwing any punches until I saw him in the one with Jet Li, and he was actually trying to throw some blows. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. But I see he actually stuck with it, and he is very proficient. Is very proficient, as far as I'm concerned. At least in a movie sense, it looks really good. He is bought and believed as a legitimate martial artist um, on screen. So all well and good for him. So this movie is my first movie of 2014 that I'm sitting in the theater and watching. I had some time today, so I went ahead and ventured out to see what movies were in the theater right now. And The BeeKeeper was one that was in there that I wanted to see, and there was a special preview showing of it tonight. So I said, I'm down. Let's go. If I don't have to wait till the 12th to see it, cool. I can watch something else on the 12th. So with that, I hustled over to my local theater and got a seat in IMAX to watch The BeeKeeper. Now, the more interesting part, besides the trailer of this, which showed me a little bit of Jeremy Irons, showed me Jason Statham, showed me Felicia Rashad in it. All that was good. What I got in the movie was something I think can grow into its own franchise and makes me a little more interested in this group of beekeepers and the world in which they inhabit. Because for me personally, I love a story where the character works with a group that is of the government, but outside the government a little bit. It has to take things a little bit further to reestablish that sense of order, justice, right and wrong, and stuff like that. I really don't have too much of a problem with that idea of people operating on that side of the world. You don't have to know who they are. They don't need parades. They don't need banners. They don't need their name in the paper. They don't need a crap load of money for doing it. They just need to understand the basics of a higher degree of right and wrong, and who is above it and who is not above it at all. So I get into that. So you get the story of Adam Clay, who is a beekeeper. And Adam Clay lives on a farm with Felicia Rashad's character of Mrs. Parker. Not that kind. And he just rents a little space in her barn and makes stuff for him, and she takes care of him in a sense. She makes meals and stuff like that. They have a friendly relationship. And I can say the relationship was quantified early in the movie about how when people get older and their kids have grown up gone off into the world and there's no young children to look after or whatever, people can fall into the cracks of seeming very useless or just forgotten in a sense. And that can happen really young. It doesn't necessarily mean it's just elderly or senior citizen people. It can happen really, really soon. Now, being in my 50s, um, I understand what that means to have a purpose outside of just raising your kids or not having a purpose. There is basically no reason for people to really check in on you outside to check in and make sure you're still breathing. Okay. So Felicia Rashad's character, Mrs. Parker, lives on a farm. She used to be a teacher. She has a retirement. She has this farm. Her husband's gone. Her kids are gone. And she's just there on this plot of land outside of Massachusetts, you know, by herself until Adam Clay comes along, rents the barn, and they actually kind of form a friendship together. Now, in typical modern fashion, there are some things that she doesn't know how to do on her computer or whatnot. And her daughter set up her computer and everything else for her. So when something pops up on her screen that tells her, hey, you need to call this number, you're going to lose all your information really quickly, she ends up falling into a scam because she doesn't know computer stuff. And she is trying to fix and respond to the message that's in her face. She calls and she gets connected with a call center and connected with the character of Boyd, played by what is this dude's name? David Witz, who gives her the name of Boyd. And he is the manager of this call center, which is basically run like a boiler room situation. That it's a bunch of hackers in a room together, scamming people through their computers. Now, Boyd talks to the woman, and if you've never seen the movie Boiler Room, you wouldn't understand that reference. But I suggest you go back and watch it. Giovanni Ribisi, Vin Diesel, Nia Long, fine ass. It's a good movie from the late 90s, early 2000s. You could find it, and it's about sales, right? And in this boiler room setting, the character of Boyd gets Mrs. Parker to access her money or open her banking account that she manages because they have mistakenly deposited $50,000 into her bank account other than the 500 that they said. So she logs in, and once she logs in, because they are now remotely in her computer, they go into her accounts, shut her computer down, and clear everything out. Retirement, everything. She is reduced to zero in seconds. And the guys at the call center are having a party because they just got her for 2 million plus. Because one of the accounts that she manages, which was a charity, they just stole all the money out of it. Now, in this scene, when this woman finds out what happened and she's realizing what just happened to her because there was some hesitation on her part to give this password or log into this account to check the balance, I appreciate Felicia Rashad being in this movie. I do. For the brief time she is, I appreciate her being in this movie for this scene. Because what is conveyed in her mannerisms, in her face, in her eyes is the utter fucking terror that I just got robbed. All this money is gone. And 2 million and something of it wasn't even mine. How the fuck am I going to get this money back? Now, I feel that in a sense because my nana, as you guys know, stays by herself. She lost her husband during COVID. She has been by herself for over a year, and it's the first time in her 80 something years that she's ever been by herself. First time. Losing her vision, can't really walk, hear too well, can't really walk too well. When I go and visit her, these are the kind of stories she's worried about. And these are the kind of stories I hear from her being concerned because people do try to rob her or just casually overcharge her a lot for shit. And it's pathetic. And it's really a maddening kind of thing that somebody would want to take advantage of somebody elderly like that. Like they don't have grandparents, they don't have parents. So seeing Felicia Rashad in this scene acting that, I felt it. I thought the woman was going to have a heart attack on the screen, for real. I really did think she was going to have a heart attack on the screen. Thankfully, she didn't. But you can see the utter terror and concern on her face about what just happened. What am I going to do about this? Now, earlier in the intro, she had actually invited Mr. Clay, Jason Statham's character, to come on over for dinner that night and she would start cooking it. He finishes up dealing with his bees and stuff like that, making his honey or whatnot, and he brings a jar of honey over. And when he comes to the house is dark. And he hears the smoke alarm going off. He goes in, something's not right. He grabs a knife. And when he walks around the corner, he sees blood and a gun on the floor with a spent round. Now, at this moment, another person enters the room and pulls a gun on him and tells him to, put his hands, drop the knife, put his hands behind his back or whatnot. And he calls the character Amora. Now, it turns out that this character is Mrs. Parker's daughter, Amora Parker, played by Emmy, Raver Lampton? Yeah, Lampton, my bad. And she sees what Mr. Clay has just saw, is that Mrs. Parker is sitting in her chair in her Sunday best, with a bullet in her head, that she committed suicide. Distraught over this money that has just been taken from her. Now, this is a terrible thing. To the character of Amora, who we're just getting introduced to, she's distraught. And we find out that Amora is actually an FBI agent that works in cyber crimes. She does not know about Mr. Clay having been staying there. She doesn't know who he is. She just knows there's a big white dude in her mama's house, and she just found her mama dead with a bullet in her head. She don't know nothing about him. Now, it gets cleared up pretty quickly that how he found her, why he was there, what he's doing there, and whatnot. But we discover Amora is really hurt by her mother's passing. And doing a short bit of investigation, she figures out why her mother is actually dead. The phone is there, the bills are there, the computer is still back on, and she sees all these accounts these windows of these accounts zeroed out. And she starts doing her backtracking on the FBI end. Now, from this point, you get an ever increasing web of understanding what is happening in this situation. When Amora comes back to the ranch and talks to Mr. Clay, Jason Statham's character, she reveals to him what possibly happened. She apologizes for, pulling a gun on him and being so rough the night before. But it turns out that her mother was actually probably scammed and her accounts were emptied out. And they quickly put it together why she did it, why she actually committed suicide and was not actually murdered. Now, this incenses Mr. Clay. And it does so because by his admission earlier, Mrs. Parker is the only one that ever took care of him. And he appreciates and respects that. So much so that he is angry. And given the tidbits of information he got from Amara, Mrs. Parker's daughter, he goes out to his beehives and pulls out one of the honeycombs, and there's a transmitter in it, and he calls some kind of communication center and gives them the information on who possibly scammed Mrs. Parker, and they locate him. Once he finds the location of that call center, he decides to show up to the call center and burn it to the ground. Now, why this sounds ridiculous, it is not something that you couldn't see happening if somebody was really that fucking pissed. Now, up to this point, you understand how controlled Mr. Clay is, but you don't know anything about him, really. And I'm not seeing that as a bad thing. I understand at this point some people could want a lot of exposition to explain who he is and everything else. There is none of that. And I think the reason that there is none of that is because Jason Statham is the producer on this movie, which means he has some control and leeway over what happens and what doesn't. And I think one of the things that happen is you keep this character's backstory a mystery. You don't explain it. You ride with the character through what he is going through right now. And through the course of the movie, you get the understanding of what he's capable of and what he is not capable of, without a lot of exposition about his backstory. Excuse me. Riveting, I see. Now, when he shows up to this call center, he pulls up in front with his truck and 2 big jerry cans of gasoline, which I think is about 10 gallons apiece. And he tells the security guards that he's coming in and what he's going to do. He's going to burn this place to the ground. Now, this is all a scene that you may have seen in a trailer. I can tell you how it happens in the movie is a lot quicker and a lot more brutal. And that's when you get the first indication in this movie what these fight scenes in this movie are going to look like. They're really quick and they are really brutal. Now, one of the things I find interesting about Jason Statham that he has done in a couple of movies so far, this movie and the Wild Card movie, if you've never seen that one, should check it out, is that the character here doesn't really use a gun. He'll use a knife. He will definitely beat the hell out of you. but he rarely uses a gun. And I think that's just a little thing on Jason Statham's part to prove his martial arts prowess in a sense. What's going on? I'm listening. Malika King. What's good? Now, from this position with these two rent-a-cops outside of this data center, because they are rude, as you would take it, up front about telling him where the F he needs to go and how he's going to get there. When they get to pull in for their weapons, they get the holy shit beat out of them. Quick, fast, and in a hurry, right in front of their job. And I can't say it didn't feel a little satisfying watching that shit. Maybe it's just me for the week that I've had, but it was kind of satisfying to see that. It was. And that feeling did not end throughout the entire movie. Now, I'll go over this one last part, and I won't tell you the whole movie because it's supposed to be a reaction, not a review. But once he gets inside, Mr. Clay Statham's character actually comes face to face with the Boyd character, which is Mikey Garnett, played by David Witts. Now, this character is kind of fun in a sense. He's supposed to be a young guy kind of attached to the mob or whatever. He's talking a lot of shit. He has a bunch of guys with him, so he's talking more shit than he probably should be. And when he sicks those guys on this man, he beats the hell out of them. Now, right before that, there's another satisfying scene in this. And I jumped ahead. Sorry. Let me back up a bit. When he walks onto the floor of this call center that you've already seen when they scam this woman out of her money, he tells them flat out what's going to happen. He's going to burn this place to the ground and everybody should leave. He wants them to repeat after him. And nobody is taking him serious. Now, mind you, picture this if you're older. You're in a room full of millennials and Zs. And you walk in there as a 40 to 50-year-old man telling them stealing from people is wrong. Telling them, taking charge of the room and says, repeat after me, that stealing from people is wrong. What do you think is going to happen? They're going to cheer and respond right away? No. Somebody gets mouthy. And the first person that gets mouthy, standing closest to him, gets the holy hell beat out of him with a telephone. And what do you think you got after that? When he goes back to telling them to repeat after him. Immediate compliance. Because nobody was expecting somebody to actually get punched in the face. I found that funny. This was not the only time I found myself laughing at somebody getting messed up in the movie, which I enjoyed because they deserved it. And that's why I was laughing, because it was satisfying in that sense. And that's what I can say about this movie in a reaction kind of sense. The fights, the actual altercations that this character has with certain people, it's satisfying. Why? Because they deserved it. They really did. They were fucking scumbags. And I found myself laughing more than just, oh, damn, that was harsh. No, I was laughing at it. I was, because I thought it was funny. Consider it a darkness in me, but I don't have a problem with seeing bad people or disrespectful people getting messed up in any kind of way. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Especially the more, how would you say, obtuse they are about it. Now, from here, Garrett is kind of warned to leave and what's going to happen. And Mr. Clay wants more information. Now, he is able to leave, but he just walks out and he does rig up an explosion. So when the next call comes through to this call center is blown up and burned to the ground. What up, Ray? And that's how you start off the movie. Now, the Tangle Web expands out to a character played by Josh Hutcherson, who was in the Hunger Games, and I keep forgetting his name in the Hunger Games. Pita. Now I finally remembered it. Pita from the Hunger Games. Okay, he's in this, and he's playing this character of Derek Danforth, which is a little 28-year-old punk. He's a 28-year-old punk, but this 28-year-old punk sits at the head of his family's corporation, who has some connections to government. And one of his little schemes that he rigged up and set up is one of these $30 to $40 million operations call centers that this one brings in about $9 million a month from scamming people out of their money. And it's a business for him. Now, where this is a problem is the person, the head of security or whatever you want to call him, in this corporation that works with this Derek Davenport is Jeremy Irons' character of Wallace Westwild. And Wallace's job in this company, he's paid very well to keep this little punk out of trouble, which is a 24/7 job apparently, because the kid is into all kind of drugs, alcohol, prostitutes, all kind of stuff. He into some wild shit, but he's 28 years old with millions of dollars at his disposal and protection. What did you think was going to happen? I will quote one of my favorite actors, Ben Affleck, from the movie Smoking Aces. They start fucking up fast and picking up steam. Now, after this little fire sale at the call center, Derek instructs his guy, Mickey Garnett, to actually go after the person who did this. And Wallace calls in his contacts that he has to find out who the person is. Now, apparently, Wallace once sat as the director of the CIA. And when he left service and retired, he was hired by Derek Davenport's mother to be in this position in her company, her family's company, and watch over her son, protect her son. So the call he makes to find out some information about who this person was that burned down the call center is to Mimi Driver's character of director Janet Howard of the CIA. Now, I like Mimi Rogers. Mimi Rogers is cute to me. Y'all know I don't have a problem with Caucasian women, and I don't have a problem with chicks with accents. That actually is a fucking cool as shit to me. It is. I don't know why. Sue me. She has a small role in this, and unfortunately, I can see her age because they're showing her in a dress with some skin showing, and that skin looks kind of bad. She's looking a little rougher around the edges than Felicia Rashad. So, be that as it may, Director Howard is able to gather some information for Mr. Wallace, and gives it to him and lets him know that this person of Adam Clay, who burned down his call center, is actually a beekeeper. And that means something, and it scares Wallace. Now, what Wallace ends up exposing in exposition to Derek Danforth is the understanding that beekeepers are a special part of the American society, created outside of government to watch over everything to make sure it runs the way it's supposed to. For me, this triggers, and you'll get the pun, this triggers the understanding of what it is in the Tom Clancy game to be part of the division. What that means is that when all these other systems fail, the law and order will not be restored by the people responsible for the law and order. That's when the division gets activated. And these sleeper agents step up to reinforce law and order. Seriously. A bit outside of the rules. This is what the beekeepers are: well trained, well financed, well connected. But the interesting part about them is that each agent operates alone. They have access to everything that they need, but they have the autonomy to decide what it is they go after. So if they find something that is amiss, they have the power, inclination, and will to see it through to the end, to go after it themselves. No congressional hearing, nobody handing down the orders, none of that shit. They operate completely solo. Now, to me, that concept is a bit funny because, or not funny, it's a bit interesting because it hits on the idea that I had for a character who worked for a contract company. And it's just something that I picked up in the 80s when I was watching Knight Rider, the Foundation for Law and Government. They were not part of the government, technically, they were private. But what they did was aid the government in making sure things happened the way they were supposed to be happening. And corruption and all the rest of this kind of stuff was kind of stamped out by outside operators to make sure the system could function properly for the people inside of it. It was watchdogged by people that you didn't know of on the outside. Now, that's an interesting place to play for me. I like that idea. It's like the idea of who watches the watchers, right? Or who watches the watchmen. Same idea. Now, finding out this information, Wallace passes this information on to Derek, and Derek passes this information on to Mickey, and Mickey puts together his own little hit team, and he goes out to Mrs. Parker's ranch and gets sight of someone matching the description of who he saw in the call center of Adam Clay, and him and his hitters go in there to try to deal with this dude. And this is the third time you've seen this dude actually beat the hell out of people. Now, this scene is messed up. They get work. They get work. Those 4 or 5 guys got some damn work. No guns were used, but they got some work. And I can tell you this. This is just a spoiler for anybody who want a small spoiler. If you're walking through a dark room with a shotgun, long barrel, pump shotgun, and you don't see the person you're looking for, but all of a sudden you get grabbed from behind, and that gun is then reversed onto you, pulled up to your throat, and then pulled into your mouth so hard that it starts breaking your freaking teeth. Ouch. It's a bad fucking day. It's a bad day. It's probably over. You're probably checking out that day. Shift is up. It was some brutal shit that happened to those dudes. Some brutal shit that frankly I had not seen before. So I was kind of impressed. Now, when I'm watching this, I'm thinking of my boy Black Bane, Sam, who is a big dude who still trains in martial arts and everything. And I'm seeing that like he could probably do that shit. Because it's one thing to give somebody a chokehold with a nightstick around their throat and choke them out. It's completely another to give somebody a chokehold with something in their mouth to the point that you're just breaking their goddamn jaw. Woo! Woo! It was rough. It was rough. But at the same time, they kind of deserved it. So it's okay. That's how the fight scenes go in this. Very quick, very hard, very brutal. It don't get better from there. And what you end up finding out is that this dude is pretty much a one-man wrecking crew. And while Jeremy Irons' character of Wallace Westwild is afraid, he knows he has reason to understand to be afraid. Because when he was director of CIA, he was read in on some of this stuff about what these operators can do. These programs that were developed by the government to help it run correctly. And understands that this person says they come to kill you, they are coming to kill you. That's just it. It's just over. Just call it a day. Get your affairs in order. This is what's going to happen because they are not going to stop. And nobody's going to stop them. So I found that whole concept very interesting. I did find that whole concept very interesting. And it was actually kind of fun to watch this guy tearing through these people, and most of the time not using a weapon. There were a couple of kills that happened because he used a weapon, but that was near the end. And given the numbers that he was up against, yeah, you might have wanted to take these people out because they actually were shooting at you. But understanding that this character has a line between who he sees as somebody who needs to be shot and someone who doesn't need to be shot, that they're just good people doing their job. So maybe you knock them out, maybe you just, disarm them or put them down to where they cannot be in the fight anymore. Is an interesting concept to understand. It shows that this character is operating at a level where he understands a little bit more of what's going on other than everybody needs to catch a bullet. And it worked a lot differently to where this character of Adam Clay can sit comfortably between John Wick and Robert McCall. He can sit really comfortably right in between the two of them and not have an issue. And I found that kind of interesting. especially since I understand that Equalizer 3 got a lot of shit because Denzel Washington himself is an older guy, and nobody really wanted to believe that he would be able to go through and take out these guys by using stealth and brutality. Well, Jason Statham is he's caught some age. He's looking like he caught some age. He is not overly overpowering anybody. There are some, what is it, Aikido throws and stuff like that that happen that is basically leverage using the other person's body weight against them. But that is some effective shit. It is. You couple that with a hard shot to the face or an elbow to the neck or some pressure point like that. Yeah, some folks is gonna be done messing with you for a minute. Some folks are. The rest of them getting bullets. So in that sense, I thought it was fight scenes great. I thought they were great. There is a scene that happens in a hallway of mirrors with a knife, which is one of the most brutal knife fights I have seen on screen. And I say one of because the Raid 2 exists. And because the Raid 2 exists, and that fight in the kitchen with the Karumbits is one of the most violent martial arts knife fights I've ever seen on screen. This one can slide up there in the 2 spot. It can slide up there in the 2 spot very easily. It is a brutal fight. That is some brutal shit. So, for me, since this is just a reaction, I enjoyed the fight scenes, which is what you're showing up for if it says Jason Statham on it and there ain't no big fucking shark on the poster. Okay. Enjoyed the fight scenes. Some actually really creative movements and stuff like that I saw in the fight scenes that I would watch again just to study what was done. Right. There's particularly one that's an interesting disarm that leads to a kill and a throw of a character down some stairs. It's really messed up. It's a really messed up move. And basically, to describe it, guy comes in with a knife. His force is redirected to twist his arm back behind his shoulder with the knife in hand. He is disarmed from the knife, and then he catches a couple of quick stabs behind his back into his kidneys. And then because that arm now gives you control over his body, that motherfucker is thrown off a flight of stairs. Ouch. He was already dead. That was a bit much. It happens quickly. And I would be interested. I'm gonna quiz Black Bane on this shit. I'd really be interested to see what he sees when he looks at those movements, what he catches in it as well. Because that was some. Look, if y'all don't know, you can check out Dave Mercaida, right? Most people know him from the Forest and the Fire guy, right? But you don't know he's a hell of a martial artist. Cali sticks and Karumbits. His knife fighting stuff is ridiculous. His knife fighting with a Karumbit is ridiculous. You will do nothing but leak. Serious. You will do nothing but leak. I'd really be interested to see him break down some of them fights, especially the knife work. Because that ain't nothing nice. That is nothing nice. What up, BMT? Hunted knife scene between Benicio del Toro and Tommy Lee Jones was a great knife fight scene. I haven't seen that one, so I have to look at that. I'd have to look at that one because I never watched The Hunted with Tommy Lee Jones and Benicio del Toro. It's not Benicio del Toro, is it? Yeah. It was it's the other guy. Anyway, I like those actors, but the movie The Hunted for me, the title The Hunted, was taken from the Christopher Lambert movie of the same name from the 90s. When Christopher Lambert ends up running across like the Yakuza, some samurais or some shit. And he ends up having to go back to Japan and fight these goddamn ninjas and samurais and shit. That movie was called The Hunted, and that movie was awesome to me. So when I saw this movie with Benicio del Toro and Tommy Lee Jones come out, and it's called The Hunted as well, they basically wiped that other movie away by stealing his name. It's the same thing James Cameron did by naming his movie Avatar. That's why you got The Last Airbender and not The Avatar, which most people knew already. They basically stole the name. So, and that Hunted movie is awesome. That samurai fight scene on the bullet train with swords. It's like shit. That dude is a martial artist. That is a samurai right there. And my favorite move is he fought on that train. And after the fight was over, they wanted to take his sword because he's not supposed to have it. So he's like, okay. He jabbed that motherfucker into the ground, bent it sideways, and just struck it one time with his hand and broke it in half. And then gave him his sword. That's the only way he was going to give him his sword. If you understand what that means in samurai culture, you don't give up your sword, nigga. You beat me, you can take it. If you ain't beat me, I ain't giving it to you. He broke that bitch and gave him the hilt with the broken sword on it. You never do no disgrace like that to me. Fuck you. That shit was powerful to me. That was a powerful scene to me. I give you what you want, but it ain't gonna be the way you thought it was gonna go. So, anyway, back to this movie. I would say it is worth a watch. It is worth a watch. It's some good action in here to watch. And I can tell you honestly, I found myself laughing a lot when some of these people was getting it. Not because it was necessarily funny, because not Benicio, Jesus Christ. Jason Statham's character does not have a lot of dialogue and does not have a lot of emotional range of what he's going through. You understand what he's going through, but it's not a lot of emoting and crying and over talking and shit like that. It's not a lot of that. So some people will hate that shit. Some people will hate it. Right? Because it's not him explaining what's going on or why he's doing what he's doing. Everybody else is there to figure that shit out. He's there to do his damn job. And his job is, I'm coming in here and I got to take care of this situation. And some of these people who get in my way is really going to get fucked up. It's pretty much what it is. Now, one of the other characters in this, Amaru Parker, Mrs. Parker's daughter, if you want to critique the movie, you can say that this character, Verona, I kept calling her Amaru. It's Verona. Duh. The Verona character is kind of a Mary Sue, but it's subdued. It's a B-dub Mary Sue, but it's kind of subdued. In some ways, they keep throwing little things in there to say how she's smarter than everybody else, but she has an actual problem to where she's kind of a fucking drunk. She drank too much. She got a drinking problem. So she's not perfect. Thick as hell. Thick as hell in a good way. Like, good God, I need some swimsuit pictures. But her character is a little bit headstrong, kind of tough, and kind of figuring everything out. And she is the one driving we got to catch up to this character because he knows what's going on, and his path of destruction is actually leading us to all these other links in the chain to understand what happened to my mother and how this goes, who is responsible for it. And it goes pretty far. As far as it goes, I was like, oh shit. That's whoo. I need a sequel to find out how that shook out. I do. If you don't want to do a sequel, give me a streaming service so I can find out how the rest of that story played out, because I need to know how that played out, because that is going to be a mess. Mess for real. Other than that, the rest of the characters are there. They do their acting. They do their job. There's a good scene between Jeremy Irons and Jason Statham. There's a good scene there. But this character is not emotional. It's own business. And they get the work. The people who get the work get it. Or I should say the people who deserve the work get the work. For real. And the reason they do is because he finally admits that it is personal. Because he liked that woman. And for me, that strikes to the important core of understanding that you never know who the fuck it is that you're dealing with. You can talk all that ridiculous shit, but you never know who you're dealing with. And movies like this actually kind of take that idea and that understanding and explore it a little bit in a safe way where nobody actually gets hurt. It's the same thing with John Wick #1. Theon Greyjoy showed up and liked his car and got offended because he wanted to say some slick shit in Russian and didn't know the dude know how to speak Russian and understood it and gave him some slick shit back. He didn't like that. So he wanted to come and steal the dude's car and kick his ass and killed his dog in the process. Not knowing who the hell that dude was. He just thought, oh, it's just some dude. Was it some dude? That motherfucker walked up on you and gave it to you without a word, without a cringe, without a monologue beforehand, just gave it to you. You never know who you fucking with. You never do. So don't think for a second that just because they ain't running around with banners behind them about saying I'm a badass, who you will actually start fucking some shit with. So for me, I enjoyed the movie. I would recommend you guys go see it, but it's always your choice to see it. It comes out on the 12th, unless you find one of these preview showings. If you do, go ahead and go watch it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. I came home with my bag of popcorn because I was into the movie and I wasn't eating as much popcorn as I was watching the damn movie and into the story and where the shit was leading more than I'm just going to chomp down on my popcorn. And trust me, I got there 30 minutes early and I still didn't finish my bag of popcorn once the movie started. So with that, this was a good entry for me to 2024, the first movie of the first month of the year. I was happy with it. I enjoyed it. I would want to see more of it in this same vein as I would put this in the same vein as an Equalizer, a John Wick 1, and the accountant with Ben Affleck, I'd put this in that same vein. Stories that were good. I enjoyed these characters, and I would want to see these characters go forward to see more of how this world fleshes out. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Like, share, subscribe, support the stream if you feel so inclined. $ artisanmc at Cash App or artisanmc at PayPal. And I will see you guys next time. Peace.